Hello, and welcome to the First Star National STEAM Academy. We are so excited to be here this December 11th for our season finale Tech Talk. This season, we've been covering the science of sports, and we have a phenomenal guest to round us out in our conversations with a talk on exercise and sports psychology. So, before we get to that, we are going to do a little icebreaker. If you're watching live, participate in the icebreaker before we get started. So, Martine, I'm going to pass it to you. Martine is one of our STEAM Academy peer mentors, so you can get us all warmed up and ready to hear from Dr. Carter today.
Morning, everyone. It sounds like we do need a lot of warming up. I don't know. I'm in California. I like the cold, so I'm fine. But other people, they need sweaters, they need all this other stuff. Let's hope my energy can bounce off to you guys and you will all feel warm and bubbly and fuzzy inside. So is the hope. All right. So I thought it'd be fun to do a cute little Kahoot game. Nothing specific for it's 2019 songs. So when you guys are ready, go ahead and join. Go to kahoot.it and then use that game, and we'll get started soon. Can you guys hear the music or no? No.
No, we
Okay.
can't.
Oops. Share sound. There we go. Now, can you guys hear the music? I cannot see you guys anymore, so someone please use the chat. Okay, good. I'll type in the game in the chat too. Try to see if I can. I know a lot of these songs, but I also don't. So let's see how much I actually. And then we'll give everyone else just a few more seconds. Hopefully, you can join. And then I'll put the game in the chat once more. So if you guys want to join in late, or if anyone joins in late. All right, let's get started. The first question: who released the hit song "Señorita" with Shawn Mendes in June? Camila Cabello, Miley Cyrus, Billie Eilish, or Ariana Grande? Exactly, Camila Cabello. This is one of the songs in my Spotify Wrapped that kept showing up. So that's the only reason I know this. And still, I'm in second place. So Bear Bear in first place. I'm in second. Jenyan. Hopefully, I'm not butchering that pronunciation. Lee, and then K. Next question. Oh, double points. Where will the horse be taken in Little Nas X's biggest hit, to his grandparents' house, to a farm, to the doctor, or to the old town road? I actually don't know this one. Oh, okay. So it was to the Old Town Road. I kind of guessed. I wasn't sure. I just know of the song. So Jen Yan, she shot up with 2,723 points. I'm in second. Bear is right behind me. Then we got Lee and Rudolph. I'm curious who Rudolph is, though. All right. So which hit song was released by this group in 2019? Sucker, Can't Help It, Cool Guy, or SOS? Oh. I think so. I don't know. Oh, cool. I don't know what these two songs are. I was hovering around this one. Hopefully you guys didn't see one else about that. Helpful hint. The SOS is a super old song. It's a good song though. Oh, Bear shot up 3,547 points. I for some reason cannot lose that second place spot. Jen Yan in third, Lee and Rudolph. All right, finish the title of Taylor Swift's song, You Need Some Food, a Girl Like Me to Calm Down for Someone Else. Oh, to calm down, a girl like me. I don't know if that's one of the lyrics. Finally. I'm finally out of that second place spot with 4,400 points. Bear is in second, Jan, Lee and Rudolph. Question 5. Who released the hit song Lights Up? Liam Payne, Justin Bieber, Harry Styles, or Bruno Mars? Huh. Harry Styles. I have no idea what that song is. Oh, Rudolph coming in from fifth to fourth. Me, Bear, Jan, Rudolph, and Lee. Question 6. Which of these songs were not released by Sam Smith in 2019? How Do You Sleep? Dancing with a Stranger, I Feel Love, or Take Me Back to London? Take Me Back to London. I'm barely holding my first place lead. Bear, Rudolph, Jen Yan, and then me. So Rudolph was able to go from fourth to fifth, or fourth to third now. So which is the correct title for Selena Gomez's 2019 hit? Love Me or Lose Me, Love Me to Lose You to Love Me or Love Me. Huh. Tougher than I thought. Ooh, moves you to love me. See if anyone got that right. I don't think anyone got that right. All right. So the scoreboard still remains the same. Question 8. How many rings does Ariana Grande sing about in her 2019 release? 5, 7, 16, or 146? 7 rings. Scoreboard most of the same with me at top. Bear, Rudolph, Benyan, and Aaron is coming up in our scoreboard. This will be the last question. We've got to move on. Let's see. Arrange the words to reveal the title of Ed Sheeran's hit song. Oh, that's okay. That's weird. Um, 'Alright, I'll give you guys like 10 more seconds and then try to skip it. That one was surprisingly harder. Or maybe just my brain that doesn't process the words well enough. Alright. Actually, we'll keep it because I don't know if skipping will end the question or just completely skip over the question. Correct order is south of the border. Yes. So I guess 17% got it wrong, but the other 83% of us, we got it right. Yeah, nice. So our ending scoreboard is me up top, Bear following pretty close with second place, Jen Yan, who came back up and scored third place, Rudolph and Aaron. All right. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. And now I'll pass it off to James to introduce our incredible speaker. So go ahead and take the ropes, James.
Okay, good morning and afternoon, everybody. I have the pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Carter. Dr. Carter is a professor at Temple University. Her work addresses women's health and intersectional inequality in exercise and health settings. She is also the executive director of the Coalition for Food and Health Equity. Without further ado, please join me in a warm welcome for Dr. Carter.
Alrighty, I'm going to share my screen here and get that on slideshow. Perfect. Alrighty, thank you for that introduction and that wonderful warm-up. I am very excited to be here today to talk with you all. I'm looking forward to talking about my journey in sports psychology as well as what sport and exercise psychology is. So I'm going to first start off with, just a bit about myself. And so, as was shared, I'm an associate professor of kinesiology at Temple. I'm also the past diversity and inclusion division head for the largest organization committed to the practice of sports psychology called the Association for Applied Sports Psychology. And I'll talk a little bit more about them later. And then I'm also the founder and executive director of Coalition for Food and Health Equity. So let's first just jump into what sports psychology is. And so simply put, sports psychology uses psychological and mental skills to enhance athletic performance. And when we think of sports psychology, there's so many benefits to the profession of sports psychology. It helps improve well-being. It helps improve athletes' self-esteem. It can help individuals manage and cope with feelings that they might feel aren't the most productive and helpful for them during sport. It definitely helps with things like team cohesion and individual resilience. as well as manage stress. In comparison, exercise psychology does similar, but amongst non-athletic populations. Most people who work as exercise psychology researchers and professionals are really interested in the social determinants of physical activity. What are the things that impact exercise and movement across all populations, not just those that are within a competitive sport environment? So, what are some common concerns or issues that individuals who practice sports psychology tend to address? And so, it's very common for sport psychology professionals to work, with things like competitive sport anxiety or sport transitions. So, if you're an athlete and you are transitioning from high school into college, then this would be an adjustment that, of course, could impact your performance, impact yourself. And so sports psychology and mental skills consultants would work with you in that area. Also, things around building confidence, rehabbing from injury. We know that injury can be life-changing, career-changing, right? And so helping athletes work through that process. Also, collective things like team building, sensitivity training, working on team cohesion, leadership in sport, as well as things like sensitivity training and assertiveness training, working with coaches on ways to be able to speak and work with their diverse team, right? So I want to take a moment just to share when we think about the field and within the field of sports psychology, I like to call it a motley mix of folks because there's a few different types of individuals and roles that people who come to this field may have, as well as just a wide variety of interest within the field of sport, as well as exercise psychology. And so when it comes to being a professional and a practitioner within this field, there's pretty much three different levels or types of education that you should look into or expect to obtain in order to be able to, one, get certified as a certified mental performance professional, as well as work with athletes across a wide range of issues. So first we have clinical psychologists. We also refer to them as clinical sports psychologists because these individuals are licensed psychologists and they're trained to work with individuals across the spectrum of just, mental health, right? And so a clinical psychologist they may be oriented to just clinical psychology, but then they also work with athletes. So their interest lies with helping athletes with problems such as eating disorders, depression, substance abuse, issues within the family, anxiety, more moderate to severe forms of anxiety, and other clinical disorders. And because they're licensed psychologists, they can work with individuals across the spectrum, right? They may also have what we call a CMPC credential, which is a Certified Mental Performance Consultant credential through the Association of Applied Sports Psychology. In order to call yourself a clinical sports psychologist, you do have to be that licensed psychologist, right? Also, individuals who would refer to themselves as clinical sports psychologists either have a degree in counseling psychology, clinical psychology, as well as social work. And when we think of, let me go back one second, sorry. When we think of individuals who can practice clinically, just to clarify, you have social workers and counseling psychologists that can do so. At the master's level, we have individuals who might have gotten a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling or social work or rehabilitation counseling. And at the master's level, they are licensed therapists. So they can provide clinical support, mental health support to athletes across the spectrum, right? Now, in comparison, we have our non-clinical psychology professionals. These are individuals that are not licensed at either the doctoral or the master's level to work with more clinical populations. Individuals under this particular umbrella are more focused on performance and enhancing performance, as well as supporting coaches with their work. If an athlete were to present with a more clinical issue like depression, anxiety, or an eating disorder, this this particular individual would refer to one or more of our clinical folks, either a clinical psychologist, a social worker, or a counseling psychologist. Now, at the doctoral level, our non-clinical folks tend to have doctoral degrees in either biomechanics, kinesiology, sports psychology, or a related performance area. Again, their focus is more on performance enhancement amongst non-clinical populations of athletes. At the master's level, individuals who we would refer to as non-clinical professionals, again, work with, they have a degree in sport or performance, and would work with athletes in a non-clinical way or coaches as well. So I do just want to give a shout out to the Association for Applied Sports Psychology. They are the largest professional organization that governs the practice of sports psychology, both amongst our clinical folks as well as our non-clinical folks, and our researchers as well. Now, within AASP, and we refer to it as AASP, oops, I don't know what's going on here with my mouse. There we go. So within AASP, they have a certification called the Certified Mental Performance Consultant Credential. We refer to it as the CMPC. And this credential can be obtained by anyone at the master's level or the doctoral level, regardless of your clinical background. So this is more focused on an individual who, regardless of that level, wants to work with athletes and wants to actually just be identified as someone who intimately understands the nature of sport performance, okay? In order to get that credential, individuals complete 400 hours of supervised training and experience. They also take a qualifying exam. And after that, then they're able to, if they pass that exam, if they complete those hours, and there's also some set coursework that they must obtain, then they can become a certified mental performance consultant under AASP. So just real quickly, I often get the question, like, what are some jobs that people can obtain within the field of sports psychology? And it really depends on your level of training and education, right? Because someone who is a clinical psychologist or a counseling psychologist at the doctoral level might find themselves with different opportunities and other things that they can do that might be different than someone at the master's level or a non-clinical professional at the doctoral level. So let's just do a quick run through. So at the master's level, what are some jobs and some available markets for individuals at this level of training to pursue? So these are things like, working with high school athletics departments as a mental skills consultant, working with coaches and athletes in high school teams, also working with community organizations and nonprofits who have a focus on sport as a form of development and community cohesion amongst, just community members. You might also see someone with a master's degree in sports psychology, whether it's clinical or not, working with college sport teams, as well as working in sport and exercise clubs, like a tennis club or something like that, helping athletes work on the fundamentals of enhancing their performance. As well as if they're someone with a master's degree with a clinical background, these are our social work folks, our clinical mental health folks, then they have that opportunity to work with athletes in a more clinical way if the athlete presented with some particular issue, some clinical issue. Our non-clinical folks, right, these are those who have either a doctoral degree or a master's degree in kinesiology, biomechanics, but they're not licensed mental health professionals, right? So our non-clinical folks typically gravitate towards academia. You can find them oftentimes as professors in kinesiology departments and even psychology departments with their speciality, doing research around various different areas of sports psychology. They might be on staff as a specialist, a sport and performance specialist within a sport organization, as well as they might have their own professional practice where they're working one-on-one with athletes, coaches, and teams on the mental aspect of sport that does not have any clinical features to it, okay? And then our clinical folks, right? Particularly those at the doctoral level. Again, these are the clinical psychologists, the counseling psychologists, and the social workers, right? Our licensed social workers. They are likely to be working in professional sport, both providing that mental skills consulting, as well as addressing any form of mental health needs that come up from the from athletes, coaching staffs, and teams. They may also have their own private practice because, again, they're clinical psychologists, counseling psychologists. So they're trained to work with individuals across the spectrum of mental health, right? And address the full on umbrella of mental health needs, concerns, and issues. So you could find someone who's a clinical psychologist or a counseling psychologist with their own practice where they work with athletes and non-athletes, everyday people who might need some form of support when it comes to just stress, anxiety, depression, these more clinical issues. And so today, where might you see some of our sports psych people existing, right? So it's so great to see how the field has expanded, is getting much more visibility and attention, and people are really understanding, beginning to understand the the unique need and the benefit of having trained sports psychology professionals, both clinical and non-clinical, within their organizations and on their teams. So you can find sports psychology professionals working for different professional athletic teams, college teams, working in higher education, working globally, really bringing the practice of sport for development and peace to other nations, right? Also within the NFL, the NBA, and as well as within our United States Olympic Committee. So we're really seeing the field beginning to expand and people really understanding, wow, sports psychology is definitely a practice that can help enhance athletes' experiences and just the sport environment overall. So I want to take a moment now and share my journey into the field of sport and exercise psychology. Because if you would have asked me 20 years ago, Leeja, what will you be 20 years from now? I would have said a clinical forensic psychologist. I would not have said anything related to sport or anything related to exercise. When I was in high school, my dreams were to be a profiler for the FBI. I was very much focused on forensics and wanting to understand the mind of individuals who committed some of the most heinous acts in our history and just generally. And I wanted to work with the FBI or Homeland Security or something like that in order to just, further help stem the rate and the incidence of some of our most severe heinous crimes. So I also thought of myself, perhaps the whole life journey was, I'd get my degrees in forensic psychology, and then I would go maybe work for a police department, work my way up, become a detective, and then eventually find my way to the FBI or even Homeland Security. Again, I never thought of myself in sport. However, when I was in college, I was a college athlete. I did pole vault and discus. And so simultaneously, while I'm getting my background and my education in forensic psychology, I was a college athlete. And so as a college athlete, I had a very unique experience, but I'm sure other people have had the same experience as me. Um, so again, I did discus and pole vault. And when I would throw discus, I was extremely confident. Even though I was one of the smaller discus throwers at events, I looked forward to discus. I looked forward to throwing. I always had a PR in mind, and I felt like I could, best myself at every single meet. There wasn't any anxiety there. There wasn't any worry about my performance. And I also did pole vault. And so if you don't know what pole vault is, here's a picture. It's essentially you have a long pole, you stick it in the ground, you bend it, and you go over a bar. That's it. And one of the things that I loved about pole vault is that you get to fly. You get to bend that pole and you're just in the air doing awesome things. Now, what's interesting is even though I was super confident with discus, I really wasn't that confident as a pole vaulter. And what I'm about to share with you is so, so, so true. That I would throw discus, I was great. But when it was time for me to pole vault, I would get so nervous. I would get butterflies in my stomach, sweaty palms, right? So, so nervous. Even before I even got to the meet, I would be on the bus if I knew that I was just doing pole vault today. So many different things were going on in my mind. And also, I never saw myself successfully completing a pole vault. And I feel like this is really important because when you think of one of the mental skills that we work with athletes on, one is called imagery, where you're able to imagine yourself doing a particular skill or even a future event, or you engaged in some situation. It really helps you mentally prepare for that performance. And for me, when I would visualize discus, I would visualize success. But when I would visualize pole vaulting, man, I couldn't even visualize myself clearing the bar. I usually visualize something catastrophic, the pole breaking, me hitting the bar, something like that. But I couldn't visualize success. And so nowadays, looking back and knowing what I know now in sports psychology, I firmly believe that this is one of the areas that if I would have known, I could have worked on then. But outside of that, I love pole vault. When I was in practice, I did well. I was a perfect practice player. It was just in the meets, things just didn't come together as I would have liked. So I have now diagnosed myself with choking when it comes to pole vault. When faced with that high pressure situation, I buckled. There was a variety of different reasons why. I wasn't able to execute the skills that I could in practice at a meet. My experience during meet time with pole vault was exceptionally high sport anxiety and very low confidence. However, I was motivated. I did love pole vault. I just couldn't pull it together when it came to a meet. And so this was during the final year of my master's program. I began thinking about, I wonder why I'm having this experience in sport, and if other people have the same experience. And my mentor at the time was the one that actually introduced me to sports psychology. He said, there's professionals that work with athletes on your exact experience, your feeling of anxiety within sport, particularly because I wasn't having that experience of anxiety outside of sport. And that became my first introduction to sports psychology was, wow, there's a profession out there that works with athletes to help them kind of remediate and resolve these forms of issues that might be coming up. At the same time, again, I was getting my master's degree in forensic psychology. And I began thinking, I don't know if I want to do forensic psychology my entire life. I don't know if I can walk up on a crime scene or work with some of the most horrendous people and issues every day until I retire. And so as I started to develop this curiosity with sports psychology, I began saying, you know what, I think I might want to look into this for my doctoral training. And so that's what brought me to, which we'll talk about in a moment, me actually entering into a doctoral program on sports psychology. But there's something really unique here inside this. And that's that, even though I was, I was an athlete, but I was still studying forensics. As I was finishing up my master's degree, I had a conversation with my dad. And my dad was born, lived, and died in Chester, Pennsylvania. And I spent a portion, of my childhood there as well. And I remember one day, just after I got my master's degree, I went to his house and I'm sharing with him, all of my goals. I've got this master's degree. I think I'm going to get a doctoral degree, and I'm going to be this person. And he said to me, he was like, okay, that's great that you're getting a master's degree, that you've gotten your master's degree and you're going to go on and get a doctoral degree. But what is all this education going to do for your community? You're getting all of this education, you're becoming super educated, but what are you going to do for the people outside of my window? And he actually opened the curtains to his window and pointed outside to Chester. So what does it all mean and matter if you're not going to bring it back to your community? That was a full pivot moment for me. That was a moment where I began to say, my education, it can't be about me. And actually, in that moment when he asked me that question, I didn't know how to answer it. When he said, what are you going to do? Why are you getting all this education? What are you going to do for the world outside of you? I actually couldn't answer it because I didn't think about how what I was doing should translate to community work, and to change making. But that conversation has forever lived inside of me. Ever since that conversation with my dad, I began to think about the next steps and the next things that I want to do with my education. Where are my priorities? And how am I investing in myself in order to come back to the community? This particular insight is something that Carter Woodson, the author of The Miseducation of the Negro, talks about. And he talks about, in that particular text, he talks about how it wasn't uncommon at that time for Black people to get educated, particularly to become teachers and to then teach in white neighborhoods. And so I began thinking about, wow, I'm getting this education to take it outside of my community. I need to bring it back inside of my community. And so I still pursued sports psychology. And I stumbled across Temple University's kinesiology program. Now, during this time, this was a time in my life where I'm like, I know I don't want to do forensics. I want to do sport or exercise. And I'm challenging myself to not use my education as a means to leave, but to come back. But I still felt deeply connected to sport and exercise. And so that's where I met my mentor, the phenomenal Dr. Michael Sachs, whom I had the blessing of sitting down and talking to him about where I was at. I didn't know anything about sports psychology other than my experience and that it can be helpful to people, but I still felt very drawn to it. So I spoke to him and I said, hey, I'd like to get a doctoral degree in sport or exercise psych. But I think I want to do things that could really help people engage in more helpful behaviors. And that could also be athletes, but also the everyday person, and understanding the ways in which, what are the different social determinants of physical activity and sport engagement, and how can I use this degree to kind of excavate all of that and provide different services to the community that could help people get more engaged in sport, both at the just everyday leisure level to the most elite level as well. And Michael Sachs took me under his wing. He said, you know what, you can do that with this degree, and let's allow your doctoral program to be a space of exploration. And so doing that doctoral program, I looked at a bunch of different things around motivation in sport, motivation flow, social determinants of physical activity in sport and exercise, particularly amongst women of color, and specifically Black women. And that became my priority, was understanding health, well-being, sport, physical activity amongst women, particularly women of color, and more broadly, communities of color, and those communities that have been historically marginalized. My research to date has looked at things like colorism in sport. What are the media narratives around Black women across their complexion and their skin tone? Does it change? And how does that impact women's sport participation, right? If Serena Williams is being compared in a more problematic way than a lighter skinned Black woman, what does that do to both athletes? And what is the environment being created in sport around Black women and elite Black women? Also looking at things like microaggressions in sport, right? These very unintentional, everyday slights that can occur anywhere. And what is the athlete and professional's experience of microaggressions? And how can we be more action oriented to create more inclusive spaces? And how does that impact performance? How does that impact the pipeline into elite sport from our young girl to our older seasoned athletic woman? And during my time, of course, I'm summarizing, but I've had the awesome opportunities to research, work, and provide sport and exercise psychology services, both domestically and globally, with athletes and non-athletes. Here's a few photos that just provide a snapshot of, what I've had the honor of doing. So I've had the honor of working in Austria with refugees on the ways in which adventure sports and physical activity helps with their transition into a new country. And what are the dimensions? What are the things that accepting countries and communities need to be aware of in order to make a migrant child or a refugee's child transition into their community more welcoming? And what is sports' role in that? Also, I've done a considerable amount of work within our governing body of AASP to diversify the field, to provide pipelines and opportunities, and to amplify the needs of diversity and inclusion within the field of sports psychology, recognizing that having greater and more diverse representation directly impacts an athlete seeing our field and saying, wow, this field is designed for many different people, not just one type or another. I've also had the honor of doing a Fulbright in London and working with some phenomenal nonprofits and researchers who research what are the different barriers and hurdles to young girls engaging in physical activity and staying engaged after their school years. And so in both the UK as well as in the United States, we see a disturbing trend that particularly girls, after girls graduate from high school and after about the age of 18, we see their physical activity just decrease. We also see their participation in sport decrease. And there's a number of reasons why that can be. And so my time in London opened my eyes to just really how this is a global issue and a global trend, and some unique ways that they're addressing this particular issue through sport, exposing girls to sport in their neck of the woods. I've also written a book on feminist applied sports psychology, which really talks about just intersectional feminism and what does applied sports psychology look like through this intersectional and very feminist lens. And there's a bunch of other things inside that too. But I think this is a pretty cool snapshot of kind of where my journey has taken me up and to date. So I'm going to close out here and say, for me, I did not see myself within the field of sports psychology, but my own experience began to open my eyes to this other field of psychology outside of forensics. And I categorize myself as both a researcher as well as a practitioner of sport and exercise psychology, particularly through a lens of inclusion and understanding really the minutia and the complexities that we all individually bring to our sport and to our performance, and providing services and support that really recognize and see that. So I'm going to end here, and I hope that I've saved enough time for any Q&As any questions that anyone might have.